Hey everyone out there in the internet world, welcome to my new channel. This is Jeffrey Paul Colnott. Maybe a few of you have known me from my music channel, which is more of a hard rock and metal covers and originals site, which is by my own name, not the one that this is referred to. This is my UAP paranormal channel. And this is more or less kind of an introduction type video. Kind of give my background, my history, my introduction to UAP, and kind of my perspective on UAP. So let's dig right in. Jeff Colnott, a 40-year-old dude born and somewhat raised in Michigan, also majorly raised in Colorado. My occupation by trade is a musician. But during the day, I do other various jobs that help me bring in revenue to, help me pay for that. Because as 99.98% of most musicians know, unless they're super lucky or have lucky breaks, you're not going to make enough money doing that to pull in the bread for the family or even yourself for that matter. You'll pull in occasional money, but not much. So moving on, my introduction to UAP, UFO, all that fun stuff. I was kind of a little bit pre-wired for it in the sense that I've always loved science fiction and I've always been open to the mind, not the mind, but the philosophy of other life existing elsewhere. And I've always loved science fiction movies, and of course, I'd heard of things like Roswell, but the government was such pieces of elephant shit in their Cold War paranoia. Oh, it's gonna cause these people to freak out. We can't have these people freaking out during the Cold War type of thing. So I didn't really think about it that hard. I'd say a little more than a year ago, I've been listening to Joe Rogan for probably 4 or 5 years now. A little more than a year ago, I had heard him with his Bob Lazar interview. I think it was either Lazar and Knapp or Lazar and Jeremy Corbell. I can't remember who was his other guest, but also he had mentioned some of the David Fravor stuff, and it kind of caught my ear a little bit. And this was a little bit, I want to say this is back towards the end of 2020. And then essentially what happened, May of 2021, I had kind of moved on to, sorry, interruptions. I had kind of moved on. I had discovered, I'd gotten more curious about the phenomena, and I had gotten to a point where, the Rogan and the Lazar stuff was kind of catching in my head, and I started searching stuff on YouTube, and I came across Charles Hall talking on one of the Nevada TV stations about his experience at Nellis Air Force Base, and that really caught my ear, and that kind of really sent me down the rabbit hole. I ended up watching all of his associated presentations, the documentary about him on Tubi, Walking with the Tall Whites. My girlfriend even she had her favorite podcast, Last Podcast on the Left, had an episode about his experiences. And one of the things that really kind of pulled me into the subject matter was his testimony. And some of it, what pulled me in is it was so batshit crazy and out of this world that I'm like, the thought that came in my head was, who would make this up? And if they did, what would they have to gain from this? Because it comes to the whole philosophy of truth is stranger than fiction. And if you read and listen and watch to his testimony, it's the most, if you're not into the subject, it's the most bizarre damn thing you've ever heard. But it was the most compelling thing I'd ever heard. And I listened to the associated presentations, the audiobooks, and it was for me, the most compelling story I'd ever heard, the most emotional story I've ever heard. It took me to places. It would if Charles Hall's story was made into a movie. You mentioned that I had a few nice conversations with his wife on Facebook. It would be, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest tale ever told. I mean, there's many greatest tales in this phenomena, but that was just like the tip of the iceberg. I'd been introduced to this species called the tall whites, which at that point I thought were aliens, which is, kind of a logical thing to assume if you don't know that much more about that particular species. But so I was just kind of ravenously obsessed at this point because it just caught my attention. So I was digging for any information I could find, presentations, YouTube videos, whatever I could find. And I came across the channel of Ryan Musgrave Evans. And at this point I didn't know much about him. I saw some videos of tall white, cloaked beings in the forest that were scaring off hunters and that kind of thing. And it piqued my interest, but I didn't really know much about it. I kept doing research and I found out he had a book. I read the book, Children of Orion, Finding the Cryptoterrestrials, and went into some of the sources, Dan Crane or Dan Burish, depending on what he wants to call himself at any particular given moment. And, he had testimony of Chris Bledsoe, and it blew my mind. So, everybody's opinion on this channel, the internet is respected because none of this phenomenon has been proven yet. But from my perspective, future lineage human beings is what the current UAP phenomenon is mostly about. There's other options here. I'm greatly interested in the Stephen Greer stuff, but also these future lineage human beings have a lot to do with paranormal activity worldwide. And there's all kinds of, we'll call them CT profile points. A lot of this I'm kind of parroting Ryan's and Musgrave Evans' some of his research and philosophies, but it's also, I've been digging my own, finding compelling. And we really, I'm not saying that all of these ghost phenomenon are not ghosts, but a lot of them are crypto-terrestrial oriented beings that have been here for thousands of years. And for every paranormal channel you see out there, I'm not trying to say they're all full of shit. I'm saying there's a good chance from the testimony and research of experiencers, which I'm not one yet, sorry, that there is a nuts and bolts explanation for it. And not just a prosaic, boring nuts and bolts. We're talking about a badass, futuristic version of ourselves, multi-dimensional version of ourselves, that has the ability to cloak, phase in out of our dimension so they can shift through solid objects. A being that can levitate. A being that has powerful force fields that will deflect the most powerful projectiles we throw at it. This is what's haunting you. And a lot of times these beings are just curious, or there's something about you that could be of use to them. Sometimes, I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a lot to talk about here. There's breeding programs because they have a lot of genetic problems through years, thousands, many years of breeding programs and genetic engineering that have caused some problems in their genome. Granted, they can live up to 800 years, but at the same time, they are slow to heal. A broken bone could kill them. Even super advanced, intelligent beings can be prone to unexpected side effects of genetic engineering. And, you know, this also goes for the Greys, which are also another form of future lineage human being, in my opinion. There are three different versions of them: the 24s, the 45s, and the 52s. As you know, that's the most, that's the information I believe in. And they have also fucked themselves up. And that's why they are interacting, but they have a far less sort of valued version of the human race and, well, the planet itself, where the Magina, P-52 Orions, have more of a care for the ancestral homeworld and don't just see it as kind of a genetic sampling place. That's kind of my 2 cents on that. But we're gonna kind of go into all those rampages, and in a way, this is another foot soldier squad on Ryan Musgrave Evans and, you know, Charles Hall, Chris Bledsoe, other experiencers, Antonio Villas Boas, all those characters. We're going to kind of get in, you know, kind of riff on that, kind of riff on my own thoughts, riff on Disclosure, our role in Disclosure, how just pontifications of different stuff, and just my own adventures in seeking out crypto-terrestrial habitations, and maybe some guidelines on dealing with crypto-terrestrials, you know, from obviously from the King, Ryan Musgrave Evans, and a little bit myself and my own adventures on that. And yeah, that's kind of where I stand on introductions. So have yourself a good night, and we will be back in the near future.